Hi guys, and welcome back to Hilltop Farm, and welcome to another lesson of Wicca. And yes, it is the first of our lessons of the Sabbath festivals, and it is the festival of Yule. Let the lesson begin. Now, I hope you all have been continuing on with your meditation and visualization exercises. And I hope you've all had fun playing around with setting up your new altars and getting the feel of those and forming the protective circle or bubble around them and feeling at one with those special objects in your special place. So what we'll be doing in this lesson is it's divided into sections. I'll be teaching you about the history of Yule. I'll be teaching you about the reasons that we celebrate Yule, and then I'll be going through a basic ritual for Yule that is for solitary practitioners, which I know most students are solitary practitioners. There are, of course, other rituals that you can do for Yule if you're part of a coven, and maybe one day when this course is finished we'll continue on doing more specialised things like that. But for the time being, most people when they start the Wiccan path are operating as solitaries, so I'm going to treat everyone as though they're a solitary at this point in time, and that's what this lesson has been designed for. The solitary practitioner. History of Yule. The pagan holiday called Yule takes place on the day of the winter solstice around June 21st in the southern hemisphere. Above the equator, the winter solstice falls around December 21st. On that day, or close to it, an amazing thing happens in the sky. The Earth's axis tilts away from the Sun in the southern hemisphere, and the Sun reaches its greatest distance from the equatorial plane. And obviously, whenever I'm mentioning North and South and the months of the year, you reverse it for the Northern Hemisphere. So, just to recap briefly, this is the festival of Yule, which in the Southern Hemisphere is on June 21st, and in the Northern Hemisphere is December 21. Alright? In addition to Christmas, there's Hanukkah, with its brightly lit menorahs, Kwanzaa candles, and many number of other holidays. As a festival of the sun, the most important part of any Yule celebration is light, candles, bonfires, and more. Let's take a look at some of the history behind this celebration and the many customs and traditions that have merged at that time of the winter solstice all around the world. The origins of Yule. In the Northern Hemisphere, the winter solstice has been celebrated for many millennia. The Norse peoples viewed it as a time for much feasting, merrymaking, and if the Icelandic sagas are to be believed, a time of sacrifice as well. Traditional customs, such as the Yule log, the decorated tree, and whistling, can be traced back to Norse origins. The Celts of the British Isles celebrated midwinter as well. Although little is known about the specifics of what they did, many traditions persist. According to the writings of Pliny the Elder, this is the time of year in which Druid priests sacrificed a white bull and gathered mistletoe in celebration. Until the 16th century, the winter months were a time of famine in Northern Europe. Most cattle were slaughtered so that they wouldn't have to be fed during the winter, making the solstice a time when fresh meat was plentiful. Most celebrations of the winter solstice in Europe involved merriment and feasting. In pre-Christian Scandinavia, the feast of Yule or Yule lasted for 12 days, celebrating the rebirth of the sun and giving rise to the custom of burning a Yule log. Roman Saturnalia. Few cultures knew how to party like the Romans. Saturnalia was a festival of general merrymaking and debauchery held around the time of the winter solstice. This week-long party was held in honour of the god Saturn and involved sacrifices, gift-giving and special privileges for slaves, and a lot of feasting. Although this holiday was partly about giving presents, more importantly, it was to honour an agricultural god. A typical Saturnalia gift might be something like a writing tablet or tool, cups and spoons, clothing items or food. Citizens decked their halls with boughs of greenery and even hung small tin ornaments on bushes and trees. And when you get your printout, I don't want you all to laugh at the picture I've got under that. I was trying to find a picture that suited the text, and I came across this delightful picture of what looks like late medieval, possibly Elizabethan sort of era people decorating their house. So it doesn't quite go with the Roman look, but it's a sweet picture anyway. It just goes to prove that the custom of house decorating with greenery has been going on for some time. Anyway, moving on, we're still back in ancient Rome here. Bands of naked revelers often roamed the streets, singing and carousing, a sort of naughty precursor to today's Christmas caroling tradition, maybe. Now moving on, welcoming the sun through the ages. 4,000 years ago, the ancient Egyptians took the time to celebrate the daily rebirth of Ra, the god of the sun. As their culture flourished and spread throughout Mesopotamia, other civilizations decided to get in on the sun-welcoming action. They found that things went really well until the weather got cooler and the crops began to die. Each year, this cycle of birth, death, and rebirth took place, and they began to realize that every year, after a period of cold and darkness, the sun did indeed return. Thank you for my coffee, Professor. It was Professor Greenfingers from our herbology department, just passing around coffee. Winter festivals were also common in Greece and Rome, as well as in the British Isles. When a new religion called Christianity popped up, the new hierarchy had trouble converting the pagans, and as such, folks didn't want to give up their old holidays. Christian churches were built on old pagan worship sites, and pagan symbols were incorporated into the symbolism of Christianity. Within a few centuries, the Christians had everyone worshipping a new holiday celebrated on December 25th. This is a Yule goddess ritual for solitaries. And this is not a ritual for goddesses, it's for the Yule goddess. Yule is the time of the winter solstice, and for many pagans, it's a time to say goodbye to the old and welcome the new. As the sun returns to the earth, life begins once more. This ritual can be performed by a solitary practitioner, either male or female. It's also easily adaptable to a small group of people. Perform this ritual on the evening of the winter solstice. If you normally wear a ritual robe or ceremonial gown, do so, and feel free to embellish it for the season. Consider a crown of holly, a special Yule-themed robe, or adding holly bling to your existing robe. Sparkly is good for Yule. Decorate your altar with a Yule log or tree, although obviously the tree might have to go on the floor rather than the altar itself. Lots of seasonal symbolism and candles. After all, Yule is a celebration of light. Now, I'm not going to go over getting your altar ready because we covered that last week, your basics of how to set up your altar. So basically you set up your altar in the same way for this, but then you add the extras. The basic stuff is all the same, and as I say, you then add the extras. I think I mentioned in that lesson 2 that I was going to show you that my wife has made a new altar cloth for Yule this year. I don't know how well you can see it, but that is it. Very festive. So we'll be looking forward to using that for the first time this year. And remember what I said about altar cloths. If you don't have one, you can just use a plain towel or sheets or pillowcase. Perfectly okay. Now, preparing for ritual. You will also want to have some holiday incense on your altar. Frankincense, cinnamon, myrrh are all appropriate to the season. Don't light it just yet though. Finally, have 2 candles in seasonal colours. Cast your circle or bubble using visualization. To begin the ritual, sit in front of your altar. Don't light the candles just yet. Take a few moments to remember what things must have been like for our ancestors at this time of year. The harvest had been brought in, and they knew that in a few months their stockpiles of food would be running low. It was the season of darkness and death, the time when the earth went dormant once more, sleeping until the spring returned. It was cold, often brutally so, and a lack of preparation could sometimes mean certain death. The days were short, the nights were long, and it must have seemed as though spring would never return. Our ancestors knew that despite the darkness of this night, soon the light would return to the earth, bringing with it life. This night, the winter solstice, welcomes back the sun, the ultimate giver of light. Now, you're sitting in front of your altar. You have it all set up. You have that bubble around you, and you've spent some time thinking about what it means, what it means to us now. In many cases is purely and simply the inconvenience of just having dark, longer hours of dark, and it being cold and it being harder to get to work or whatever because of the weather. But as I say, think about what our ancestors must have gone through. It literally was life and death. Sickness went through villages, and you didn't know whether your children were going to survive. You didn't know whether the elderly were going to survive. You didn't know whether you were going to survive. And that's before we even start talking about your livestock. And you had to get everyone safely through that time until the sun came up. So can you imagine the joy that they must have felt getting to this point, knowing that from here on in, the days was going to start getting longer, and that every day you saw longer daylight, which meant you were that one step closer to spring. Must have been a very stressful time, but a very important time as well. So having contemplated all that, we then honour the winter solstice. Light the first candle and say, "Tonight is the night of the solstice, the longest night of the year. As the wheel turns once more, I know that tomorrow the sun will begin its journey back to us. With it, new life will begin, a blessing from earth to her children. Light the second candle and say, it is the season of the winter goddess. Tonight I celebrate the festival of the winter solstice, the rebirth of the sun, and the return of light to the earth as the wheel of the year turns once more. I honour the eternal cycle of birth, life, death, and rebirth. Light the remaining candles on the altar at this time, and if you have decorative holiday lighting, turn it on. Return to your place at the altar and face the holiday tree or Yule log. Raise your arms up to the tree and say, today I honour the god of the forest, the king of nature who rules the seasons. I give my thanks to the beautiful goddess, whose blessings bring new life to the earth. This gift I offer you tonight, sending my prayers to you upon the air. Light your incense, and if you'd like to make an offering of food, bread, or something else, do so now by placing on the altar. Now, as the smoke of the incense rises to the night sky, meditate upon what changes you'd like to see before the next Sabbath. Reflect upon the time of the season. Although winter is here, life lies dormant beneath the soil. What new things will you bring to fruition for yourself when the planting season returns? How will you change yourself and maintain your spirit throughout the cold months? When you are ready, either end the rite by closing the circle or bubble. Enjoy the rest of the festival by feasting, drinking, telling stories, laughing and dancing. Very simple, very basic. Just a couple of quick tips for you. I spoke about the tree. What we do is we have a live pine tree that we keep in a plant pot, and obviously it lives outside for most of the year, but it comes in as our Yule tree. So that's what we do, and it's the easiest way to deal with it in our opinion. Another tip, if you don't have a ritual robe, and most of you won't at this stage, you can take a cleansing bath before the rite and then wear a simple garment made of cotton or other organic material. Another option, if you've got time, would be to make a robe as a Yule gift to yourself. And it only has to be very simple. You find if you are a sewer, you can go to most fabric shops and you can actually buy, if you look in patterns in the costume section, you can usually find robes and those sorts of things in there. Things you can adapt anyway. If you're not a sewer, you can just see what you can find in shops that is just plain cotton, maybe in the nightwear department, I don't know, that's just baggy, comfortable, that you can move in, you feel free in, that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, it's all about you feeling good about yourself, being comfortable, and some people, that's why some people opt to do this naked, and if you're one of those people, that's fine. I personally am not comfortable with that, but I don't have a problem if other people want to do that. Other people don't feel right at ritual unless they're absolutely made up for the occasion, and they spend hours preparing themselves, and that's fine. Everyone approaches this differently, as you all know. That's what Wicca is about. It's what sets it apart from other religions in many ways. This week's assignment. After Yule has taken place, as of the next day, and I know it's difficult being winter, sometimes it's hard to get a day where the sun shines, sometimes people live, you know, in places where it's not necessarily easy to get outside, but I want you to try and do this exercise. I want you to continue with your daily meditation and visualization, but over the next week, if you can either go outside when the sun is shining or sit in a window with the sun's rays hitting you, allow yourself to be warmed by the sun's rays. Think about the living seeds waiting under the soil to feel that warmth that you can feel. Think about the unborn animals growing in their mother's womb, waiting to feel the warmth of the sun on their backs. So what I'm basically asking you to do is you can either do it in place or do it as an extra. Look, if you might live in the middle of New York City and the only place you can go is a very public park and you might not feel comfortable sitting there meditating. That's fine. If the best you can do is sit on a bench in a park surrounded by people and just sit in the sun and just take in the warmth of the sun and the feeling, and think about the trees, the seeds, the animals, the birds, everything that's going to benefit from that warmth as the days get longer and longer, and the life that the sunlight and that warmth is going to bring to the earth. That's what I need you to do, and that's what I need you to concentrate on. After your ritual at the Yule festival, you are then free to play music. You have a feast, a meal. You laugh, you joke, tell stories, play games, whatever you like. All that we say is you be careful and you don't drink and drive home. And that includes flying your brooms. Not allowed to drink and fly brooms either, because the witch police will get you if the civilian ones don't. Civilian ones? That's probably not right. But you know what I mean. So basically, enjoy yourselves. And if you are someone who's doing it on their own, and their family knows, that's wonderful. Include your family in it. If your family doesn't know, well, just make up an excuse to say that they're wonderful, so you've made a particularly special meal for them, and not only would you like to have a meal with them, but you'd perhaps like to turn it into a games night and play a few games afterwards, and include them that way. So I want to wish you the happiest of you. Oh, I nearly forgot. What am I saying? As a bonus this week, you will be able to, in the description below, there'll be a link to this. You'll be able to download this. I don't know if you can see it. But this is a recipe for simple Sabbath cakes. They're more like cookies, but they're called Sabbath cakes. They are so easy to make and delicious. These are ideal to have, the minced fruit pies that is traditional to go with Christmas. This is kind of like a Yule version of that. So there's something that you have when people first arrive. They can just have one. You can put one on your altar as an offering if you want to. You can have them in place of dessert. They're just something you just leave on a plate, and people can just nibble on in between courses of the feast. Or yeah, it's just something extra and something a bit special. Alright? Now, they're called Sabbath cakes because they're prepared on, well, you can put them on all Sabbats really, hence their name Sabbath cake, not Yule cake. But obviously this being the first one, this is the first one I'm going to use them for. So that is the recipe, and you can download it in the description down there. So that is that. Oh, the other thing I was going to show you, on your Yule altar, you can put, I think I said when we covered altars, you can put anything you want on there that you are drawn to. Anything that pertains to Yule has a special meaning to Yule for you. Now, this little thing here was a gift to me from someone in our coven. It's a weird little thing. I don't know if you can see it all that well. It's actually, apparently it's some kind of a seed pod, a nut that's been carved. All these holes are actually where the seeds were. But it's been carved. And what you do, you get your essential oil. In the case of this, I'm using clove, but you can use anything really. Now, I'm just going to dab it around here, and then you anoint the whole thing with the clove oil. And once you've done that, the oil absorbs into the wood. Now, you don't have to have a seed pod to do this, you know. You could find the branch of a tree and scrape all the bark off and dry it out thoroughly and give it a bit of a sanding to make it nice and smooth. You could do it, you know, and make a Yule log, make a sort of a long, smooth, ornate looking thing that you can then anoint with oil. So this is well and truly anointed there. Perhaps see it's now glossy and changed colour. It smells gloriously of cloves. Now that is all ready to go on our Yule altar. I guess you could even hang it on the tree if you wanted to, but I'm going to put it on the altar. And I use this at most festivals, and what I do is, once the festival is over, I usually leave the oil on it in between festivals because it keeps the wood from splitting. But a couple of days before the festival, I will actually run it under hot water to get as much of the oil off of it as I can, and then I will anoint it for the next festival, depending on what incense I'm drawn to for that particular festival is, and then put that on the altar for that. As I say, you may not be able to get hold of one of these particular things, but you can certainly get, as I say, a piece of a branch, dry it out, sand it down and make it all smooth, and you've got the same principle really. You can do the same thing. Alright, so that's something else to keep in mind, and maybe in a future special we might make this one of the craft things we make. Now, I'm pretty much sure that's all I have to cover for this lesson. Down in the description below there is the printout for this one. You will see too the link that is for the playlist down below. The top playlist is for all the lessons from start to finish, including this one. There will be another playlist starting up down the bottom, and that playlist will just have the Sabbats on it. Obviously this will be the first one on it, but that playlist eventually will just be for the Sabbats. So that will be a link down there for that, as well as for this printout. There'll be a link, as I said, for the other printout, for the recipe for the Sabbath Cakes. The other link down below will be for our affiliate with the book depository. So you're welcome to go through there at any time and purchase any book you require, whether it be for Wicca or for any other purpose. And by purchasing your books that way, you will be helping our channel a little bit to continue bringing these to you. The email address for the school is also in the description down below. If you want to get in contact with me or leave a comment, you can do so. And if you don't want to leave a comment, actually down below, if it's something private, put it in an email and shoot it across to me, and I will get back to you. I'm pretty sure that's all we have to cover this week. So that's the end of the lesson. Do bear in mind that next week's lesson we are covering the phases of the moon and their relevance to us witches. There will also be a special coming out on the same day, which will be a ritual for the upcoming full moon. So that you'll need to keep an eye out for as well. So a busy week coming up. As I say, enjoy your Yule festival. If you like this video, give us a big thumbs up. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of our other videos. Hit the notification bell, and hopefully YouTube will let you know every time we download or upload a video, I should say. And until next time, it's goodbye from Hilltop Farm. See ya!